Is Africa set to benefit from the recent US-Africa Leaders Summit? How will the whole of Africa benefit when other leaders were not part of these talks? Is the US threatened by China's presence on the continent? Why is Africa calling for the Africa Growth Opportunities Act extension? What time is it? It's question time. Welcome to the show. My name is Mpho Tsedu. The recent United States-Africa Leaders Summit came at a time when Africa continues to become an investment destination for richer countries, including China and the US. With all 7 of the 10 fastest growing countries in the continent, this is by no means a surprise. While the US financial pledges are welcome, most analysts have raised concerns about the absence of Sudan, Zimbabwe, Eritrea, and the Central African Republic at this gathering. My guest today is Kes Kovadia, Director at NEPAD Business Foundation, and joining us from our Pretoria studios is Deputy Director General at the Department of Trade and Industry, Xavier Karim. Welcome, gentlemen, to the show. Let me start with you. From NEPAD point of view, are you satisfied that 1, there was this summit, and 2, did it bring out anything that you had not known before the summit happened? Are there any benefits here?
Well, I think it's very good that there was a summit. I think the first US-Africa summit. US is an important partner to Africa, trading partner and otherwise. And so I think the summit was welcome. Anything new? I think that what happened is that it enabled African leaders and the US to actually focus on what the critical issues are. There have been a number of pledges, both from the private sector and the US government. And I think the proof is obviously in the pudding. We need to now follow up on that. We need to ensure that our governments on the continent begin to interact and begin to have the environment in place to actually attract private sector investment. So I think the conference was good. I think the summit was good, and we now need to follow up on it, from both sides.
DDG, what did this mean, for South Africa in particular? We know that South Africa is supposed to be one of the leading countries here on the continent. Was it worth anything?
Well, I think by all accounts, the summit was a success. I think that what was quite interesting in the summit, aside from it being the first time that African leaders have engaged the US at that level, what was very interesting outcome of it is the extent to which the US is very supportive of a very broad development strategy that African leaders, government leaders, business leaders have been undertaking, have committed themselves to. So there's a broad support from the US administration, from US business leaders to support Africa's development agenda. And that's to say that they want to build on the trade relations, they want to increase investment into Africa, support our infrastructure programs, support our industrialization programs, and support our regional integration programs. That was quite interesting in the sense that the message that we were getting from US leaders is that they're quite supportive of the programs that African leaders have adopted themselves.
Now, I'll pose this question to both of you, but let me start with you, DDG. Critics said the fact that this meeting or this summit is called by President Obama somehow says, Africa, we can summon you to DC anytime we want to do so. And therefore, this is some form of political control over Africa by the US.
Well, I don't think that that's necessarily a correct assessment. The President Obama visited Africa last year, and at that point had already indicated that he was going to invite African leaders to a summit. And this is not the first time that African leaders have attended summits with different partners. We have regular meetings of African leaders with China, with Japan, with the European Union. So this is something that is happening, and it's a recognition by many of our trading partners that Africa is on the rise, as you were saying in your introductory statements. Africa is on the rise. There's great potential, but there are also significant development challenges, and our partners recognize that if we're going to realize the potential, and if they can benefit from those prospects, then they should assist us in overcoming some of the challenges that we've identified.
Okay, Mr. Kuvadi?
I would agree with that. I don't think it was a summons from the United States. I think it was an invitation to African leaders. I think that it's a recognition that Africa is a growing continent, economically and otherwise. I think it's a recognition that, as you said in your introduction, that 7 of the fastest growing countries in the world are on the African continent. So I think that we should welcome that. And as the VSA says, that it's not the first time we've had a summit. We've been to China for summits. We interact with India. We interact with the European Union. So I think this is a good news story for Africa, and that's how we should actually look at it.
Would you say, therefore, that this critics, there's something that they're missing, and perhaps if so, what is it?
I don't know what the basis is for that sort of criticism. I mean, a lot of what happens going forward lies with us. It's not as if we are going to the rest of the world any longer with a begging bowl. We are going to the rest of the world, saying that we are a growing continent. There are significant opportunities on this continent. And we're not talking aid anymore. We're talking trade, and we're talking about economic development and economic investment. And that's how we're actually going out to the rest of the world. So I'm not too sure what the rationale is for making that sort of analysis, but certainly from what I've seen, and I was in Washington last week, the whole atmosphere was one of African leaders saying, we have a great deal to offer. We are out there. We are offering this to U.S. investors as we are offering it to the rest of the world, and come and invest.
Now, what has happened in the past is that African countries would go to those summits and say, okay, we're opening up our borders, our shores for investment. But are those markets being opened for Africa?
Yeah, look, I think the whole question of intra-African trade is a serious one. I mean, I think we have intra-African trade is about 12% of the total trade of the continent. If you look at Europe, it's intra-European trade, it's about 60%, the same in Asia. North America is about 40 to 45%. So that is a serious issue, and I think that is something that African leaders and business and the private sector in Africa needs to give some priority to, look at why that's not happening, what are the issues that's actually holding back intra-African trade, because I think we're missing opportunities, we're shooting ourselves in the foot, and I think that we can actually, if we grow intra-African trade, I think we can take a significant leap as far as the positioning of this continent goes in the global arena.
Okay, I want us to take a quick break, and when we return, let's talk about AGOA and why there's a need to extend its validity. For now, we're going to take a quick break. Please don't go away. We'll return shortly.
Village is a large family homestead with 16 huts, each of them with its own specific purpose.
My responsibility, it is taking care of the family. As far as cleanliness is concerned, I have to make sure that I keep the home as clean as possible every morning when I wake up.
That's Kaleidoscope, Sundays 5:30 p.m. on SABC News.
SABC, sharing
20 years of inspiration.
Welcome back. You're still watching Question Time. My guest today is Mr. Kes Kuvadia. He's the director at NEPAD Business Foundation, and joining us from our Pretoria studios, Deputy Director General at the Department of Trade and Industry, Javier Karim. But before we go back into the program, let us quickly have a look at this inset.
Rapid Response Partnership, with the goal of quickly deploying African peacekeepers in support of UN or AU missions. And will join with 6 countries that in recent years have demonstrated a track record as peacekeepers: Ghana, Senegal, Rwanda, Tanzania, Ethiopia, and Uganda. And we're going to invite countries beyond Africa to join us in supporting this effort, because the entire world has a stake in the success of peacekeeping in Africa.
They are changing their stance, and they said as much, that they are not wanting to send their soldiers, really. They would want the boots to be local. In other words, the soldiers that go to specific areas to be local, they are there to support it, because they would want to ensure that Africa is secure.
That was President Jacob Zuma and President Barack Obama there. But perhaps we even go to the AGOA subject. DDG, America seems to be emphasizing very much on security, although, I mean, you had health and economic investments as some of the issues that had to be dealt with. I mean, is this to any advantage for South Africa?
Well, the discussions on trade and AGOA are an important component of the overall relationship. And if you look at the growth in trade between sub-Saharan African countries that are eligible for AGOA and the trade with the US, over the last decade, they quadrupled to a peak of around $99 billion in 2008, when just before the crisis, the economic crisis hit. The trade suffered after the crisis. It's beginning to recover with sub-Saharan Africa, but not at the level that we had in 2008. The story is slightly different for South Africa. Our trade doubled over that same period up until the crisis. It took a hit during the crisis, but has now recovered to a higher level than we had in 2008, and it's around $15 billion US dollars currently. So the trade is an important dimension of this. We, from the South African perspective, the trade with the US is fairly balanced. We import and export sort of equivalent amounts. The trade is also very balanced in terms of the types of products that are being exported. In many regions, South Africa exports mainly raw materials and minerals, but with the US, we export a lot of auto parts and autos. We export chemicals and some other processed products. So it's very important for our industrial development. And the US exports to South Africa a fairly wide range of manufactured products. So it's a very solid and balanced relationship. AGOA has been an important part of that, has helped to contribute to that balance and to that growth in trade. So the call from South Africa and from from all the sub-Saharan African countries that benefit from AGOA was to continue this program. Extend it for another 15 years. It's due to expire in September 2015. So the call is to extend it for another 15 years and then find ways of improving on it and ensure that the program also supports a broadening of the trade. Okay.
Now, DDG, I was saying that I want us to just dwell a bit more on AGOA, but a quick one. The question of security seemed to have ranked very high for the U.S.
Well, the questions of security are obviously a part of the overall relationship. This is not an area that the Department of Trade and Industry is directly involved in, but we do recognize, obviously, that security development and economic growth are closely linked. So to the extent that we ensure security, we're also able to ensure that economic growth continues, that there's economic development in that context. So they're all part of the framework of strengthening our ability to develop.
Okay, Mr. Kovani, the fact that AGOA is about to reach its sell-by date, before or if it is to be renewed. If you were to analyze it, has it been successful?
Yes, I think it has been successful. Javier has quoted some figures. It's undoubtedly been a significant contributor to a significant increase in trade between sub-Saharan Africa and the United States. So it has been a contributor, and that's why I think as a continent we are ad idem in saying that we would like to have it extended, and we'd like to actually see in extending it how we actually improve on it and actually make it even more beneficial, certainly to the continent, but it's been beneficial to the US as well. So I think that it's certainly been beneficial, and it is a very important lever in trade arrangements between the US and the continent.
Would Africa not have achieved what it has achieved without AGOA, for instance?
No, I think trade between the US and Africa would probably have been lower without AGOA. I mean, the fact that we have preferential arrangements as far as our exports to the US go, has got to be in our advantage, got to be to our advantage. So I think that it has been an important tool. I think it came in at a time when Africa was still not the powerhouse it is today. I think it enabled Africa as one of the tools to actually become the investment destination it is recognized as today.
And without it, what challenges would Africa have faced?
Well, without it, it would have made exports into America more difficult. It would have made imports from America more difficult. It would have done away with the preferential tariff arrangements between America and sub-Saharan Africa. And so I think that all of that put together we would still have had trade relations, but what AGOA has done is actually eased the way. It made them more preferential, and it enabled us to do that, to have trade relations in a way that has benefited our economies far more than it would have benefited our economies without AGOA.
And has NEPAD played any part in that?
Well, NEPAD Business Foundation, and I think you need to separate it from the NEPAD Secretariat. Sure. The NEPAD Business Foundation has certainly used AGOA to enable its members, businesses doing business across Africa and with America, to actually take advantage of some of the stipulations of AGOA, and we've been very successful in unlocking business opportunities across Africa in areas like agriculture, other forms of infrastructure, and so on.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break. When we return, we'll wrap up the program. This is Question Time. Please don't go away.
I realized life is short. I want to live my dream.
They can burn my face, but not my voice.
I'm definitely not a cross-dresser. South Africa, I'm just a gay man.
Join Puleng Molebatsi on Bupilong every Saturday at 17:30 CAT.
SABC, sharing 20 years of inspiration.
Welcome back. You're still watching Question Time. My guest today is Mr. Kas Kovadia, Director at NEPAD Business Foundation, and from our Pretoria studios, the Director, or rather the Deputy Director General at the Department of Trade and Industry, Javier Karim. Now, DDG, there were many countries invited, but Sudan, Zimbabwe, Eritrea, and the Central African Republic were not invited, and these are some of the countries which I know South Africa has very strong links with. You didn't in any way want to find out why they were not invited?
Well, the invitations came from the U.S., and clearly the U.S. has the ability and the right to invite who they want to the summit. South Africa followed through on the invitation, honored the invitation of attending, because we saw that there are great opportunities to build African and U.S. trade relations. So, yeah.
So does it not therefore mean that perhaps some of the deals that you could have clinched there should not involve either Zimbabwe, Sudan, Eritrea, or the Central African Republic? Are there no such conditions that you would have to cut operating ties with those countries?
No, there are no conditionalities to the deals that were struck in the U.S. I wanted to just pick up on a couple of the other points that you'd raised earlier about the importance of AGOA. I think the question that you raised does point to one of the difficulties in the trade relations between the U.S. and Africa, and that is that the main constraint to our trade is not about the preference per se, but it's about the ability of African countries to produce goods that they can sell beyond just commodities. Aside from South Africa, which I mentioned, also exports autos and auto parts and chemicals and other value-added products, not very many other African countries have been able to take advantage of AGOA. So one of the main discussions that happened in Washington, and I think there's now general agreement that we need to focus on this, is not simply granting the trade preferences and extending the trade preferences, but also focusing on building productive capacity across Africa to take advantage of the open U.S. market. And so investment, incentivizing investment, U.S. investment into Africa, to build productive capacity, to improve our infrastructure. Those are really the real challenges to building this economic trade and investment relationship over the medium term.
Okay, Mr. Kovadia, the exclusion of those countries that I mentioned, how does that affect trade, perhaps amongst African countries, whether in regional blocks or things like that?
Well, I don't think it should affect trade amongst African countries. As Javier said, the U.S. extended the invitation. Their prerogative who they invite and who they don't. We have trade and political and economic relationships with probably all of those countries, and we will continue to do so, and they will continue to have relationships with other countries in Africa. So I don't think it has any impact on our relationships with those countries. Okay. I don't think that the fact that those countries were not there, I don't think that impacts negatively on the ability of business in the U.S. to actually invest in Africa. And business private sector will ultimately invest in countries where there's an environment where they can make sustainable profits.
Yes.
And there's a reasonable environment of human rights and political stability.
Okay.
And that's the bottom line at the end of the day.
This one inevitable question, whenever we talk trade and investment on the continent, the China factor.
Yeah.
Somehow, and I mean, taking leaf from some of the SMSs and Facebook messages and postings that were exchanging units, there was a feeling that it would appear America is trying to ensure that China is not given more access than it has so far. Is it that much of a threat?
Well, I think that there's absolutely no doubt that nobody can ignore the fact that China is very active on the continent. I think that in the early days, when China started being active at the time when America and Europe had more aid relations rather than trade relations with sub-Saharan Africa, certainly outside of South Africa. China came to the fore at a time when the African continent started saying that, hold on a second, aid is well and good, but aid is not going to grow this continent. Trade is going to grow this continent. And China came in and said, well, we want to trade. Okay? And they started trading. Now it's an ambivalent, I guess, situation. Some people say that they're extracting minerals and not adding much value. Others say they are adding value. I think overall it adds value. I think we need to, as a continent, under the AU, ensure that our relationship with China is such that there's some sort of equity in those relationships, although we shouldn't overplay that because compared to China is the second largest economy in the world, and it's a player. So I think that, and I have no doubt that America as a country also sees that China has to a certain extent surpassed it on the continent as far as trade goes, and they now want to also say that we are here to trade with the continent, and we are here to compete with China to a certain extent. And that's got to be good for the continent. I mean, if other countries and businesses in other countries, large countries, are actually competing for investment on our continent, that shows we're doing something right, and we should be able to take advantage of it.
From the Business Foundation side, what are you expecting to see, and perhaps just give us some timelines? The summit has come and it has passed.
Well, we'd certainly like to now firstly begin to communicate with our government, with DTI and other departments, to say, okay, summit has come and gone, pledges have been made, agreements have been made. Now, how do we actually, as business, work with our government to begin to activate that, one, for investment into South Africa, but also, two, given that NEPAD is intra-African, how do we also begin to activate these agreements for the benefit of the continent? And so we start interacting with governments, we start mobilizing business, we start interacting, enabling our businesses to interact with those businesses in the US who have made pledges to actually come in. And we begin to actually put the real trade agreements into place to make this a reality. And that's what I think we've got to start doing.
DDG, let me give you 10 seconds to just wrap up. What should we expect from the DTI?
Well, I think, as Cass has said, I mean, that's a one dimension of the work that's going forward. The other is that we have a broad commitment from the U.S. administration and members of Congress that were represented at the summit for the extension of AGOA. At the end of the day, Congress will decide itself, and we want to make sure and keep pressing and lobbying for an early decision by Congress to extend AGOA for, we hope, for 15 years. And that decision should come as soon as possible. So we'll continue to lobby and encourage our U.S. partners to do just that.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Can I say hello to Javier? I mean, we've been talking to each other. Hi, Javier.
How are you, Cass?
I'm okay, yeah.
Okay, I can hear you, but I can't see you.
Okay, that was question time for today. A big thank you to my guests and to you for watching this show. We welcome your feedback via email, questiontime@sabc.co.za. Our Twitter handle @questiontime24 from me and the crew. Have yourself a wonderful time. Goodbye.